Successful Minds with Patricia Barnowski-Schneider, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success and get exclusive advice on how to implement their success into your life and business. Successful Minds with Patricia Barnowski-Schneider is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Patricia Barnowski-Schneider.
Hey, are you looking to scale your business from 5 figures to 6 figures or 6 figures to 7 figures? If you are, I have the perfect thing for you. What I want you to do today is I want you to go download a book. This book is going to take you through my 3-pillar system. It's 100% free. All you have to do is go to growfast.cash. I say again, go to growfast.cash and you're going to be able to download my free international best-selling book, which is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. You can take that book. It's going to help you scale your business to the next level. Again, go download it. Be good, be brief, be gone. Growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome to Successful Minds. I'm your host, Patty Baranowski-Schneider. Today I'm joined by Chet Galaska. He's got a very interesting story, so I'm going to leave it for him to tell you about it. So welcome, Chet. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, Patty. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
First of all, I'm not a medical professional of any kind. I'm a retired business person, but I'm dealing with diabetes as a big issue in our society. The reason for that is that I've had type 1 diabetes since 1981, and I've learned a lot about it. I'd like to tell you a quick story about why I started doing this. I was in Chicago during the week when Ron Santo was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Thanks.
During that week, there were a lot of stories about him, and it turned out that he also had type 1 diabetes during the 1960s. He was afraid the Cubs would fire him if they found out, so he kept it a secret. Well, one of the things that happens with type 1 diabetes is that you do need to take insulin. And as a result of that, you can have low blood sugars.
Okay.
Everybody knows that high blood sugars cause the long-term damage, but low blood sugars can be a problem in a different way. What happens is that your brain takes glucose directly out of the bloodstream. It doesn't store it like other tissues do. So when there isn't enough glucose in the blood, the brain starts to go haywire. Things start happening. You can start sweating. You can lose your coordination. Your eyesight gets funky to where you're seeing double or triple. All kinds of things happen because of that lack of glucose. So Santo's in a game in Chicago. It's the last of the ninth, 2 outs, 2 men on base. And, it's the last of the ninth. So the game's about to end. Santo's in the on-deck circle, and he feels the symptoms of low blood sugar coming on. Now, he's keeping this a secret, so he can't go back to the dugout and tell a manager he needs a candy bar.
Right.
So he just prays that the guy at the plate will make it out. Well, he didn't. The batter walked. So now they're down by 2 outs, bases loaded, and Santo walked to the plate. He said when he looked up, he was seeing triple. There were 30-some-odd people out in the field. There were 3 pitchers, 3 scoreboards. When the guy threw the ball, it looked like it had a slinky attached to the back of it. So Santo took a wild cut at the ball, connected, and put it out of the park for a walk-off grand slam home run. So he ran around the bases and got back to the dugout in time to eat the candy bar. And nobody was the wiser for 10 years when they celebrated Ron Santo Day. And that's when he came out to the public and admitted that he had type 1 diabetes for all those years. So what a great story. Most people think that the walk-off grand slam's a story. The real story is the drama that was going on in Santo's head as he's out there. No, that I could collapse. I could really collapse in front of all these people. And then my secret's out of the bag, and who knows what happens from there. So I came home and started telling that story. And that's when I realized how poorly people understand diabetes. I understood type 1 because I had had it for many years. But what really struck me is that people asked me about type 2, and I discovered that much of what I believed was wrong. And that's when I realized that if somebody like me has it all wrong, then our society really has a problem with this. And
Right.
sure enough, as I started talking to more and more people, I realized that this is a big problem with society, where there's a stigma associated with diabetes that's based on misinformation.
Right.
And that stigma deters many people from getting the care they need. So my mission now in retirement is to try to dispel all of this misinformation that's out there and create a society that respects diabetics who fight it and
Mhm.
encourages those who don't to take it seriously.
Yeah.
So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
No, that's an amazing story with the player. I never knew that. And it is true. It's like, I know of diabetes. I don't have it personally. I don't know anybody in my family who has it. So you know of it, and you hear horror stories about people who I guess don't monitor their glucose and the issues that they're having and blah blah blah. But for the average Joe, it's one of those things that if it doesn't affect you or somebody you love, you don't really know much about it.
Right.
And it's, you just know that it's a bad thing, but supposedly if you monitor it, you're okay. But then there's levels of it. Because I know one other person who is constantly taking shots and has these contraptions on him. And his life is, it's a shame. He's like a young, good looking guy, doesn't want to date people because he's embarrassed. So there's obviously other layers of it that I have no clue,
Yeah. Well, not only are there layers, but it's such a complex disease that it's been
Yeah,
said that no two cases may be exactly alike.
right,
So it's not like one size fits all. Um, you are typical. You have a surface, some sort of a surface idea of diabetes, but it's
right,
not based on fact because you haven't
yeah,
been presented with the facts,
right,
and much of what you see is misleading.
right.
For example, one of my favorite peeves is these advertisements on TV where we have all these happy dancing diabetics who are just thrilled to have this medication.
Right.
It almost makes you wish you had diabetes. I mean, these people, I mean, look at them. They're all dancing. They're happy. It's a wonderful thing. But even with the medications, there's a lot more to it than just the
Right.
medication. And that's a misleading thing that really hurts a lot of people. I do
Yeah,
know people who think that their doctor's at fault because he doesn't prescribe the right medication, when in fact, no matter what the medication is, you have to use diet and exercise
right,
to control your blood sugars. The meds help, but they
right.
aren't the main course of treatment.
Wow.
And that's one of the reasons that I'd like to get people to understand what's going on so that they
Right,
respect people who fight it. Now, you
right,
mentioned that guy with all the stuff hanging off him. He's probably got a continual glucose meter and an insulin pump. And you're
yeah,
right, it's stuff that you carry with you, but that really does make it much easier to control diabetes. If
right,
you're willing to go that step and use all that stuff, you're probably going to live a much longer life.
right.
So, he deserves credit for doing what's got to be done.
Yeah, I don't knock him at all. I mean, I just
Yeah.
feel bad.
But that you mentioned he's embarrassed, and you're right. That's part of the stigma.
Right,
Before COVID, I gave my classes in person. I did them in conjunction with the University of Massachusetts, Springfield College,
right,
Bay State Medical Center had me come into their clinics and do the program. And I got to know a lot of diabetics doing that. And one of the things that was most gratifying for me is that when the class was over, a diabetic would come up to me and say, the best thing you told me is that I'm not at fault for getting this.
yeah,
You can see the guilt and shame drip off their faces because
mm,
they really thought they brought it on themselves. And Patty, that may be one of the biggest things that's out there that needs to be dispelled. The idea that if you're overweight, you're going to become diabetic and
right,
therefore it's your fault. The fact is that both type 1 and type 2 start with a genetic predisposition. When that gets triggered by something in the environment,
right,
that's when the underlying conditions start. Without those two factors, you're not going to get diabetes no matter how much you weigh.
right,
In fact, if you look at the statistics, the National Institutes of Health tells us that about 70% of us are overweight, but only about 10% of us have diabetes. At the same time, there are many thin people who watch their diets and exercise who do get diabetes. The
yeah,
reason is because of the genetics and the environmental triggers.
right,
So we really need to get that off the table.
yeah,
There is some truth to the weight thing because once you have the underlying conditions, then weight does become a factor and you should watch it. But it's a curious situation that's a little more complex than people would probably think. And with fat, there are two main kinds of fat. There's subcutaneous fat, which is the soft, squishy stuff that's underneath your skin. That's what we all think of when we think of fat.
Right.
But there's another type called visceral fat. That's hard, and it's packed internally around your organs. Visceral fat makes the underlying condition worse. So if you lose weight, you lose that visceral fat first, and you help your condition by doing that. So it doesn't cause diabetes, but it helps manage it if you lose some weight.
Right. Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
So now I guess it kind of boils down a little bit. So what motivated you to write the diabetes book, What Everyone Should Know? And what key messages do you hope that readers will take away from it?
It was the fact that I've met so many diabetics and other people who
Right.
do not understand diabetes. Even diabetics often don't understand it well. And there are reasons for that. The main one is that it's really a complicated disease and it takes time to understand it.
Right.
Unfortunately, in today's medical environment, you spend 15 minutes with your general practitioner who may not be a diabetes specialist. In fact, he
Right.
probably isn't. And he probably doesn't have the depth of knowledge to treat you anyway for the
Right.
diabetes. If you're lucky, like I am, you have an endocrinologist, and I'll go see her 2 times a year. And I see another professional the other 2 times a year. I see them once every 3 months,
Okay.
and they're able to spend an hour with me. And that's what it takes.
Right.
You know, if you're really going to be educated about this and understand what you have and what to do about it, it takes time.
Right.
So I'm trying to fill in the gaps and just give people a brief overview of what the facts are
Right.
so that at least they have the base knowledge to know what the truth is and what
Right.
isn't, and have a good idea as to what direction they should go in.
Right. Yeah, I agree 100% on how it's not the same for everyone and whatnot. I mean, I don't have diabetes, but back in the day, I used to suffer from migraines. And it was the same thing. Doctors didn't spend enough time to figure out what was causing it. It was like, you have migraines, and they have a list of pills. Take this, take this, take this, But, and I would have other people tell me, oh my God, you have to take this. It's the greatest thing in the world. That to me was like taking a Tic Tac. It might have worked wonders for them, but did nothing for me.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. And migraines, what causes it could be different for everyone. So, I mean, I'm finally clear of all that, but I spent decades dealing with all that. I never had a doctor, even went to a brain specialist
Wow.
who sent me to sleep studies, blah, blah, blah. But the crazy part was my whole issue was about, like, I used to take a bunch of vitamins, nothing bad, vitamins, but I guess it was so many that my body was rejecting it that way. But no one ever took the time to really delve into what my issue was. They
Yeah.
just have their list of their textbook, check this, check this. So yeah, finding someone to spend the time and really help you understand, because like you say, there's a lot of different variations of it, and you got to figure out where you fit in there, and what works for everybody might not be best for you, but they have to figure out what does work best for you to make your life, as livable as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess, can you explain some of the most common misconceptions about diabetes and why they're dangerous?
Well, the first one is about weight. Um, as I explained, weight does not cause diabetes.
Right.
So that's the biggest one because that's the one that really underlies the stigma.
Yeah.
People look at you and they say, well, you've got diabetes. Well, you're overweight. What did you expect? We all know that being overweight causes it. Well,
Right.
it doesn't. So that's probably the most universal problem there is out there.
Right.
Another is that it's easy to take care of. And this is where those advertisements I talked about come into play,
Right.
where you're led to believe that, gee, if you just take this however often, you're good.
Right.
Not only that, but if you don't have rhythm, you'll learn to dance.
Exactly.
And it's like it's really misleading.
Right.
Every single medication dictates that it's used with diet and exercise. It has to be that way
Right.
because no matter what medication you take, you're going to take a fixed amount, and your diet plays a role. If you eat a lot
Right.
of sugar or a lot of carbohydrates, which, by the way, carbohydrate isn't sugar off the top many times. It gets digested into sugar,
Right.
and 1 gram of carbohydrate digests into 1 gram of sugar. So when you're looking at a nutrition label, you
Right.
shouldn't look at the sugars. You should look at the carbohydrates because that will really tell you what the impact's going to be. which
See, I
is
wouldn't
another
know
thing that most
that.
people don't know.
Yeah, I
Yeah, but
wouldn't know that.
that is a key piece of information. You know, if you're just relying on the sugar content and not the
Right.
carbs, you're missing the boat entirely.
Wow.
So, but that's why, you know, the medication doesn't work on its own. If you're taking that X amount of medication and one day you're going to sit there, you know, eating bonbons and watching TV, and the next day you're going to watch your diet and go for a walk, you're going to have totally different blood glucose levels.
Right.
So the fact that it's easily treatable is another myth. And that's the reason that diabetics need respect. If you're
Yeah.
fighting it, really, you need respect for learning what to do and then doing it.
Yeah.
Because really, it's a lifestyle thing that you think about all day, every day.
Yeah, I knew somebody, not that far from me. It was the same issue. Their whole family was used to doing their own routines, and he wound up getting diabetes. And now he has to kind of exclude himself from the majority. I mean, he's still around, but you can't participate in all the things that everybody else did. And what was unfortunate, he was doing great. But then once you were doing great, you think, okay, it's not so bad now.
Mm.
That put him right back into the hospital. So it's but you don't realize the lifestyle change that you have to encounter and how that affects, if you hang out with this group or you hang out with that group or you work here or you're around this, some things have to change. And people, like you say, don't realize the sacrifice that a lot of these people are going through. It's just to
Right.
have a normal life. I mean, yeah,
Yeah. And it can be really complicated.
yeah,
You know, diet is a hugely complicated
yeah,
topic. You know, you talk to a nutritionist, and man, you will get a lot of information that you can't even absorb, never mind use.
yeah.
But that's another thing that I address in a different way. Instead of giving people particular diets that they ought to follow, what I recommend doing is what I do myself. And by the way, I'm in very good control. I've had this for over 40 years, and you know I'm doing well. But this is what I do. Instead of looking at all these foods and trying to figure out what's good, what's bad, what should you eat, what you should not eat, I just look at what I'm actually eating. If you look at your diet, the chances are your breakfasts are pretty much the same. Your lunches are probably pretty much the same. Dinners will vary, but over the course of a month, they'll repeat. So the universe of foods you really have to worry about is not that big. And if you learn how to identify carbohydrates in your diet, you can usually pick some low hanging fruit where you can say, well, this is obvious. This is where my blood sugar is getting spiked. And if I reduce this or I cut it out, it's going to make a big difference. What I found is that a lot of people eat cold cereal for a snack before they go to bed. Well, cold cereal in general is very high in carbohydrate. The favorite cereal they eat is Raisin Bran. I used to love Raisin
Supposed to be
Bran.
healthy, right?
Well, you would think, but you know what, Patty? If you really look at Raisin Bran, you know the bran's got some carbohydrate. The raisins certainly have carbohydrate, and just for the fun of it, they sprinkle it all with sugar. So you know, look at the content of a box of Raisin Bran, and you find it's very high carbohydrate. Um, so if you're eating that before you're going to bed, number one, you're boosting your blood sugar right up. And secondly, you're not doing any physical activity, so you're not going to work it off at all.
Right,
So that's a big way to control your blood sugar. If you just stopped eating the Raisin Bran
right,
and ate some protein that will not raise your blood sugar at all, that's a
right.
big difference. I had a woman in the class one time. She told me her blood sugars were always over 200, and no matter what she did, she couldn't get them down. Well, we took a look at her diet, and it turned out that her husband worked the second shift. He liked to have dinner when he got home, and he liked pasta. So she would make him pasta every night, and she would eat with him.
Right.
Pasta is very high in carbohydrate. So I asked her just for the next week, just stop eating the pasta, eat something different. Make it for your husband, but you don't have to eat it.
Right.
She came back the following week, and her blood sugars were down in the low 100s, which is
Wow.
perfect. So in her case, it was pretty easy to identify what the culprit was.
Right.
So that's what I suggest. Take a look at what you're doing rather than turning your whole life upside down and say, well,
Right.
you know, what I ate before, that's out, and we're going to do all this new stuff. Work around the edges, you know, find the obvious solutions and
Right.
use them.
Yeah. No, makes sense. Now tell us, your Challenge Diabetes program, it aims to educate and inform. So tell us a little bit about the program and its impact so far.
Well, so far, before COVID, we helped quite a few people. I did the program locally here in the Springfield area. We are a very diverse community. We're about a third Caucasian, a third Latino, and a third Black. And we don't, just as an aside, we all really seem to get along pretty well up here. I don't know what the magic sauce is, but we do. When I did these programs, I would have a mixture of all of these groups, and I got to know them all pretty well. Um, and I know I helped them just by telling them the basic things that I just laid out to you.
Right.
Because, like that woman who identified the pasta, that's something everybody could do. You go home and figure that out.
Right.
And then once you figure that out, you realize that what works for that works for other foods too. So it's an incentive to get you to do that. We had a reward program where we would ask them for their A1Cs. An A1C is a blood test that measures your average blood sugar level for the previous 3 months.
Yeah.
The average level is what causes the damage. Temporary spikes in blood sugar aren't a problem, but if you're having chronically high blood sugars, that is a problem. And the A1C will identify that. The challenge was to lower your A1C to below 7.0 or any amount at all. If you have an 8.5 and you load it to 8.4, then you were victorious. You did something right to get it down. And what we would do for a reward is give them free T-shirts. They would simply say CDP challenge met on the front of it and nothing on the back. The thinking was that people would wear those T-shirts and people would ask them what the challenge was, and that would give them an opportunity to explain what they learned about diabetes and get people who don't have it to understand what's really going on.
Right.
So a lot of people won those T-shirts. So that was helping them. When COVID came, all of a sudden everything blew up. So I couldn't meet with anybody, couldn't do the program at all. And during that time is when podcasts really started to become more popular. And it dawned on me that I can reach a whole lot more people by doing podcasts than I ever can by doing local programs with 12 or 15 people at a time.
Yeah, see
So I
people around
started,
the world.
I'm sorry?
You get to talk to people around the world.
Yeah, I do. And I tell you, one of the great things about podcasts is you talk to all kinds of people you would never, ever be able to talk
Yeah.
to. I probably write a book about the various people I've talked to. It's really a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But it's especially fun because I've got podcast hosts like you who are willing to give me an opportunity to share the facts. Yeah, I am reaching a lot more people. So I'm not doing the courses in person anymore,
Right.
but a lot of information is on my website. I'm on social media and I do posts once a week where I give people information they can use.
Right.
So that's what I'm doing now. The whole thing is kind of evolved because
Yeah.
of conditions outside of me.
I mean, it actually, it works out good. And now, like with digital marketing and whatnot, I do like how you can reach such a wide audience and you can help people that, like you say, you probably would have never even encountered before. And, you could be interactive. You can have, tests. You can have, games and who's going to win this, like you said, with the t-shirts. I mean, there's just so much that you could do. And, getting people to give their feedback and ask questions, even having live Q&A. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
maybe someone else will ask a question. I'll be like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. Yeah. Well, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Looking to grow your business beyond 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures plus? What I want you to do is go download this book. The title is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. It will help you grow your business past 5, 6, and 7 figure. Go download the book today, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and download the book for absolutely free.
So now tell us, there's often a stigma associated with diabetes. So how can a society help dispel the stigma and support those living with the disease?
Well, the first thing is to understand that diabetics did not bring this on themselves.
Right.
So they're stuck with it, just like I don't equate diabetes with cancer, but just like cancer or MS or migraines, You don't ask for these things. They happen to you because of your genetics and whatever factors might be involved. So we need to get rid of the shame aspect of this. There's no reason for a diabetic to be ashamed because they have a disease. But people also need to know that diabetics are not wedded to a really strict diet all of the time. Give a diabetic a break. If he's eating a cookie, let him enjoy the cookie. It may raise his blood sugar some temporarily. If he gets it down, there's no harm there. So, give him a break. In fact, I tell people you don't have to restrict yourself to never eating your favorite food anymore. I like pasta. I eat it sometimes. I don't eat it every night, but I do it, and I figure, I'll take some insulin or I'll go for a walk to knock the blood sugar back down. So, don't give me a hard time. This is funny. I was at a dinner one time at a Polish restaurant. And I know you would understand. You got to be a pierogi lover. Well, I was in this restaurant and I ordered the Polish platter. Of course, I'm Polish too. And this guy sitting next to me knew I had diabetes, and he looked at my plate. And he said, "You going to eat all that?" I said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do." He said, "Number one, you've got kielbasa and another sausage there. That's all protein. That's not going to raise my blood sugar at all. So I'm going to eat all that. I've got galunkis. That's pork, rice, and cabbage. Well, the cabbage and the pork isn't going to raise my blood sugar, but the rice will. But I like them, and it's not so bad. It's not like I'm eating pure carbohydrate here. So I'm going to eat the galunkis. The pierogies are a lot of carbohydrate. It's dough, but you know what? I really like pierogies. So I'm going to eat those too. But that bread that came with the dinner, you can have it. I'm not going to eat the bread, and I'm not going to have dessert either. So that's how I adjust for this. You work around the edges.
Your battles, yeah.
Yeah, you pick your battles. You eat the stuff that you really like. And the following day, he asked me what my blood sugar was that morning. I said it was 114, which is perfect. So he was impressed. But this is the thing, Patty. This is what people need to understand, that diabetics are making these decisions all of the time. You also have to factor in what your activity is going to be. If you're going to go for a long walk after you eat something, well, yeah, you can eat some carbohydrates because the walk will drop your blood sugar. And people need to understand that too. When people think of exercise, they think of, running a marathon or working up a sweat and all that stuff that a lot of people detest. Luckily, the exercise that works for diabetics isn't strenuous exercise, it's moderate exercise. And the definition we use is anything that makes your skeleton move. So if you're walking up and down stairs, if you're vacuuming the house, if you're playing with the kids, if you're walking from your car to your office, anything that makes your skeleton move will lower your blood sugar. And actually, moderate exercise works better than strenuous exercise does. And if you're active at least every 2 days a week, the effect stays for 2 days. So you really do yourself a lot of good just by being active.
It's funny how, with the stigma, when you mentioned in the walking, because I just spoke to somebody recently, and they mentioned that someone they knew had gotten diabetes. She was very heavy at some point. She had gotten diabetes. I remember her mentioning walking all the time. Like every time she ate, she said, we moved to this new neighborhood. She was gone for like an hour. We were wondering where she's at. And she said, I have to get my walk. And then wasn't that helped her get rid of the diabetes. She lost all the weight and the diabetes miraculously disappeared. So again, it was all blamed on the weight. But meanwhile, she was super active and walking constantly. So it's not just the weight.
You kind of touched on something inadvertently here about the diabetes going away. The term diabetes just refers to your blood sugar level. It's not actually a disease in itself. We have prediabetes, we have type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes. They're all different in some ways. The common thing is that they result in high blood sugars. So when you say this person's diabetes went away, what you're really saying is that they dropped their blood sugar. Excuse me. They drop their blood sugar.
Mhm.
And I'm going to have to back up a little bit here to explain to you how diabetes works before I explain insulin resistance. When you eat food, it gets digested into glucose, which is a sugar that gets carried to every cell in your body. When your pancreas senses the sugar in the bloodstream, it releases a hormone called insulin. Insulin's job is to be a key that unlocks the cell doors to allow the glucose to go from the blood into the cell. When that happens, the cells get nourished and the blood sugar drops. So natural bodies work that way. It's really a miraculous thing. Now, with type 2 diabetes, you get a condition called insulin resistance. That means that your cells require more and more insulin to open up those cells, that they become resistant to insulin. And that condition is incurable. So once you have it, you're stuck with it. The only question is, how well can you manage your blood sugars? Can you manage them well enough to be below the diabetes threshold or not? So this woman obviously managed it well enough to get it below that threshold. Therefore, her blood sugars aren't at that level anymore. And to her tremendous credit, the walking is what made the difference, because every time she walks, she's dropping her blood sugar. If she was sedentary, it would be a whole different story. Her blood sugar would rise. So, but here again, that's another reason she deserves credit. She's taken the effort to do the right thing, and it's working for her.
Right. I mean, she passed away at this point, but due to old age. But it was just ironic that the way the story was told to me was basically had nothing to do with what she was doing. It was more about the weight. It's like she got heavy, she got diabetes, she lost the weight, she no longer had diabetes. That's how the mentality of everybody
Yeah,
around her saw it.
exactly. I mean, that is what people think. And that's why I mentioned that the biggest myth is the idea that diabetes is caused by
Right.
being overweight.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, losing the weight certainly helped,
Yeah.
because she did lose that visceral fat, and that did help the condition.
Right.
So altogether, it's a winning way to handle it.
Yeah.
I had a woman who did the design work on one of my books, became diabetic a few years ago. And she told me that, I did the design work on your book, but I never actually read it. But I went to the doctor and he prescribed this medication for me. I went to the pharmacy. It was going to cost $500. So I told him to put it back on the shelf. Then I went back and I read your book. So I did what you suggested, which is really watch your carbohydrates and go for a walk. So she did that. Over 3 months, she lost 20 pounds and her blood sugar dropped. And she went back to see her doctor again. And she said he gave her a standing ovation.
Wow.
And he asked her how she did it. And she says, well, I read Galaska's book, like he knows who I am, right?
Well,
But she just followed. Well, I should read it, because what I'm teaching people is really the basic stuff. And this isn't stuff that I've made up. Everything that I tell people I've gotten from the Joslin Diabetes Center or the Mayo Clinic or the NIH. I mean, it's all boilerplate stuff that people just don't know.
Well, it's tricky too in the medical field, because I don't want to say all, but I say the majority of doctors they use the term pill pushers, because it's all about how much money can the pharmaceuticals make. It's not about what's best for you. It's about, there are a handful of doctors that do want to do what's best for you, and they'll do it the right way. So educating the medical field on alternative ways to keep them healthy would be a lot better than just, pushing pills,
Yeah, but you know something, Patty? This isn't even an alternative way. This is the way. It's the first thing you do. And some people actually control their blood sugars just with diet and exercise. It takes a lot of willpower to do that, and most of us don't have that much willpower, but it can be done.
Right. And definitely a lot better. Like even on the television, every time I see the prescription commercials, I mean, it's like 30 seconds of what the medicine is and 2 minutes of what the side effects are. And it's kind of like, unless it's going to kill me to not take it, I don't know if I would want to take it. I mean, the side effects are just, and then it'll end with, this isn't all of them, all of the side effects. It's like, oh my God. But yeah, I mean, people should try to find an alternative way to, because look at you, you're living healthy and life is good. It's obviously discipline and whatnot, but better than, popping pills and probably making your situation 10 times worse behind the scenes.
Yeah, and especially since the pills won't work unless you're using diet and exercise
Right.
anyway.
Anyway, right. That tells you mentioned that the misleading messages from the medical and pharmaceutical communities that it contributes to confusion about diabetes. So elaborate on this and maybe suggest some ways to combat that.
A lot of it, again, has to do with weight. Even a lot of doctors, I think, believe
Think so,
that being
yeah.
overweight causes diabetes. It's just been out there so long and
Right.
so widely that even a lot of them subscribe to it. That's where endocrinologists and specialists called certified diabetes education specialists come in. They
Right.
really know, and they will tell you the same things that I've been talking about. But your typical healthcare provider hasn't had specialized training in diabetes. And so they'll kind of fall into the same kind of thinking. Like I mentioned the book designer, her doctor, his
Right.
first response was to prescribe the medication. He never even mentioned diet and exercise. So that is the first line of defense. And
Mhm.
why don't GPs understand that? But that's very widespread.
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest thing. And this idea that you can take meds and it'll fix your problem. It's even more so today with these GLP-1 inhibitors.
Yeah.
I asked my endocrinologist about that, and she said she's had to take some people off that medication because when you lose weight, you don't just lose fat, you lose muscle mass also. So some people are unable to maintain their muscle mass, and so they
Right.
have to go off it. But even if you're on it, in order to maintain your muscle mass, you have to eat a lot of protein. So you're
Which
not,
is better for you.
well, it is, but if you're not used to eating protein and all of a sudden you're not eating that much to begin with, and then what
Yeah.
you're eating has got to be protein, there's a change that you have to deal with too.
Yeah.
So it's not like these medications are get out of jail free cards.
Right.
There's still a lot of work the individual has to do to learn about it and do the right things.
Right. Wow. I mean, it is a shame that they don't have enough education or care to really help explain it. But I guess based on a lot of that, what are some real life stories or examples from your experience that illustrate the challenges and triumphs of living with diabetes?
Here's one that hits close to home. I was the president of an industrial company for 23 years until I sold my interest in it and retired. There was a guy who I had known for many years. I was president of that company for 23, but I worked in the industry for more like 30. And I'd known this guy for probably 25 years. I spoke to him on the telephone a few years after I retired. Turned out that he had type 2 diabetes and he ignored it. He went to the hospital and they took off one leg on one day and the other one on the next. So
Wow.
now he was in a wheelchair. Well, the reason that hits close to home for me is that during all those years that he worked for me, I kept my diabetes a secret because I didn't want people thinking less of me because I
Right.
had diabetes. That's one of the things that the stigma does.
Right.
It makes most diabetics or many diabetics become silent about their disease. And I thought to myself, what if I had been open about it during all that time? And he had come to me and said, Chet, I've got diabetes. What can you tell me about it?
Mm.
Well, maybe he'd still be alive today. When I talked to him, this is probably 8 or 10 years ago now. When I talked to him, uh, 2 years after I talked to him, he had died. He died of diabetes complications, and I went
Mhm.
to his wake. So this is serious business. And the idea that we're reluctant to talk about it is really a danger. We ought to be able to support each other.
Right.
I'm very active in the YMCA, and they have a Live Strong program there for cancer victims. And it's great. These people come in, they have groups, they exercise together, they support each other. And it's like we've all got this serious thing going on. We all have the same challenges, and it's good for everybody because they can relate to each other's experiences.
Right.
But diabetics don't have that so much
Right.
because we don't talk about it.
Yeah. It's crazy because the one friend that I know who is diabetic, he actually did this like sport event one time and was trying to raise awareness for it. And I was, trying to get a lot of media involved. Nobody cared,
Mm,
because I guess it's not like cancer is like the big C. Everybody heard about that. Diabetes, you don't really, I mean, you hear of people having it, but it's not, it's not on the same level, I guess. Like
right.
nobody really cared or acknowledged it or whatever. I was like, wow, that's pretty unfortunate. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of support. It's a
Yep.
shame. So I guess how can friends, neighbors, or relatives and best support one another with diabetes?
You can learn about it.
Mhm.
The best way to learn about it, well, of course, I'm going to say this because it's my way, but if you go to my website, I've created a couple of videos that I made them less than a half an hour long each.
Right,
My hope is that people will use those videos and show them in groups,
right,
so book club, church group, civic group, whatever. I mean, I gave my
right,
program to all of those groups. You could have the same sort of setting and get the same kind of information that I have shared by
right,
using those videos. The beautiful part about them being a half an hour long is that if you have an hour-long meeting, you can watch the movie and then you can talk about it, because some
right,
of the most valuable interactions come from diabetics or people who care about diabetics talking about their experiences.
right,
And it becomes a very powerful experience if you do that. So there are the two videos. Um, I do charge a small amount of money for them just because I have expenses.
right,
I wish I could give them away, but I do have expenses. But that would be a really good way to do it.
right.
Another way is to become my friend on Facebook. I put out posts every week where I identify one issue and explain it, and I do it in less than a minute.
Right,
So it's not going to take you a lot of time out of your day to listen to
right,
it. Um, for example, the one that I put out today or yesterday has to do with medication and the way diet and exercise are necessary to making those meds work. So
right,
it's that kind of practical snippet that they'll
right.
get. So they could do that. And if they go to my website, they'll find those snippets are there. So you can
Okay,
view them at any time.
right,
So if you want to just cruise through that and pick what you want to listen to, it's there.
right.
So I would suggest that.
Okay. And,
Otherwise, the problem, Patty, is that it's such a complicated disease that I pull my information from all kinds of places. To
right,
find some of this stuff, I actually read scientific studies. Like, for example, that idea that visceral fat is the first fat to lose. I did serious research on that to try to
right,
find where the answer to that was.
right.
The same thing goes with a lot of the other practical things that I share. So I would use my website as a starting point.
Okay.
And if you get curious about it, there are lots of places to get information,
Right,
a lot of which are bad places to get information because it's not correct. But
right,
with what you learn just by watching my videos, you'll be able to separate fact from fiction. And at
right.
least right off the top, you'll say, well, that doesn't sound right. And go to a reputable source that does
Right.
sound right.
Or bounce it off you.
That too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now tell us, what are your future plans for the Challenge Diabetes program and any other projects that you're working on to continue raising awareness and educating people about diabetes?
What I'm trying to do is become fluent in social media.
Oh.
I'm of an age and it's not easy, but I'm
It
out there.
changes every day.
Oh man, that's a whole nother podcast. But what I'm trying to do is get better at this. I'm on Instagram also. I plan to be on Twitter or X, and I'm just trying to get it out that way. Uh, I've done the hard work of producing those videos.
Right,
So they've been done for a couple of months, and now my focus is on getting it out to as many people as possible.
right,
And that means talking to podcasters and doing the social media. So that's really my focus. I've developed the program. Now it's how do I get people interested enough to
right,
learn about it?
right,
And I think that churches, for example, are a great place to go. About 10% of people have diabetes.
mm,
And that means that, 1 out of 10 people has
right,
diabetes, and they all have relatives who care about you, and they
right,
also need to have the information. So there are a
sure,
lot of people out there that really need to know the facts.
right,
And that's what I'm trying to do. Just get it out there.
right. It's funny, I actually just did a blog today about the various social medias, how, like, you have LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I mean, hashtags, and this one is mostly video, and this one's mostly personal, and then it's groups, and it's basically a full-time job just focusing on the social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why, like, sometimes because I do like marketing, and I'll do social media for some people, and they act like, so what, you made a post? It is, you have no idea the work involved in doing that and how to get it on every single thing and getting it in front of the right people. It's a lot of work, but yeah, I mean, you're doing all the work. You can have, blogs, you could really getting it in front, because the churches, it's a great lead, but I don't know if they're even on social media, but putting newsletters, distributing it to them, or, I mean, there's just a whole lot of work, but it is something that people, because like I said, it's one of those things, if it doesn't affect me personally, I don't really know about it, but
Sure.
what I do know obviously is not correct. So, it
But
is good to get educated for somebody has it,
but Patty, unless I missed my guess, you found what I've told you to be interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
What I was also doing before COVID is talking to a lot of groups. I used to do Rotary clubs quite a bit,
Okay.
and there was one club I went to down in Connecticut, and it was great. I mean, people listened, they asked questions, and it was
Right.
really a good, productive meeting, as they always are. But afterwards, I was sitting with the president of that chapter, and she said, "Did you see that table over in the corner with those four ladies sitting there?" She said, "They always sit there and they talk, 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 no matter who the speaker is. But when you talk, they listen." She said, "It's the first time that's happened."
Yeah, because
So,
whatever you're saying is opposite of what most people assume or read.
well, I think people realize that they don't know. They
Yeah,
just don't know, and they're curious about it.
yeah,
And when I talk about it, then they feel like, okay, now I've got some handle on this. And
yeah.
that's what it is. Even if people don't have diabetes, they're curious to know what the facts are.
Because we all heard of it, and we might not know somebody personally, but we know somebody who has it. It is something that we all should be a lot more educated on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anything else you're working on or you want to talk about that we didn't touch on?
No, that's about it. This is my retirement project.
Oh,
Uh,
very nice.
yeah. Well, you know something? It's great. I'm 72, be 73 next month.
Wow.
And it's great having something to focus on.
Right,
Every week I'm writing something to put out there on social media. Of course, I'm
right,
doing the social media. I'm doing the podcast, and it's great feeling like I'm doing something really productive.
right.
Some people think I'm crazy doing this, but I enjoy it. And as we mentioned earlier, I enjoy talking to people like you. So it's not really work for me. I
No, that's
enjoy it.
awesome. Yeah, and you're helping a lot of people and, educating people, and because, I mean, especially diabetics, the ones that I do know, they probably have no clue about half of this stuff. They just know whatever the doctor tells them, and I just know from personal experience, they don't always know either. They just kind of wing it and hope for the best.
Yeah, it's
That's
too bad, but
insane.
there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just know somebody went to the hospital, took every test under the sun, and they just don't know.
Yeah.
That's not an answer. Like, how do you not know? But yeah, that's the world we live in. But I guess, how can people get a hold of you and learn more about you? And I'm going to include your website and everything on this, but if you
Sure.
want to
The
direct them.
The website's the best way. It's
Okay.
www.challengediabetes.us. It's not .com, it's .us. And if you'd like to communicate with me, the best way to do it is reply to me through the website. I am on social media, but I don't really carry on conversations there.
Right,
I've got a lot of friends, and I would spend my whole life responding to that
right.
if that's what I did. But if you send me something through the website, I'd be more than happy to get back to you.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was Chet Galaska. So thanks for listening to Successful Minds with Patty B. Never miss an episode by subscribing. So thank you again.
Thank you, Patty.
My pleasure.
Hey, we all want to scale our business. Hey, I have the answer for you today to help you do that. If you're looking to scale from 5, 6, even 7 figures and beyond, book called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. I'm going to give it to you for free. All you have to do is type in growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and you can download the book for absolutely free. I hope the book helps you this year. Take your business to the next level. Again, go grab the book, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. I wish you the best and grow, scale, and win.
Thank you for listening to Successful Minds with your host, Patricia Barnowski-Schneider. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we'll see you on the next episode.
There it is. Magnum. Holy moly.
Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
Dear God.